Welcome to the IT Career Energizer podcast. For anyone who wants to build and grow a career in IT, develop and improve your strengths and skills, be inspired and motivated by the successes of others, manage your career progression, and achieve your IT career goals. And now, your host, Phil Burgess.
Welcome to the 162nd episode of the IT Career Energizer podcast. My guest on today's show has worked in IT for over 20 years after failing to become a writer, and divides his career into three parts. The first third was spent building applications for the fast-paced online gambling industry. The second third maturing that business in third-line support and operations, and the remainder working on container technology within the highly regulated financial sector. So welcome to the show, Ian Miell.
Hi, good to be here.
So first thing I wanted to do is ask you about maybe being a failed writer and why you actually transitioned into IT.
Yeah, I mean, this is going back a bit. So 25 years ago, I graduated with a history degree and had ambitions to be a journalist and a writer. And I got work as a journalist while I was a student. I actually worked at the Times for a few weeks on a sort of scholarship and kind of enjoyed it. But I decided that journalism wasn't really for me, that I liked actually writing. And journalism was more about the industry of churning out words. So I tried my hand at, I went abroad for a year and taught English and tried my hand at writing a novel, which I did, and then tried to sell it. Pre-internet, interesting challenge. And with no contacts or any kind of real track record, I basically failed to sell it to anyone or even get an agent to pick it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, that was that. But I kind of got that sort of out of my system and then decided that, this IT thing seems to be going well. I always liked computers. I was a bit of a geek as a kid before I got into, the humanities, the arts. And I had maths A level, was always good at maths. So I thought this is a good choice and decided on that as a career. And so at 25, I did a conversion master's at OpenBet College in London, borrowed the money and never looked back, really.
But you haven't necessarily left your writing skills behind. You've subsequently written books with the technology slant to them.
Yeah, so I've come full circle, really. All that writing, doing the history degree and journalistic sort of training has paid off because about 5 years ago, I got into Docker very early in its sort of hype cycle and was offered a contract to write a book based on, I think I did a video for another publisher on Docker and that sort of got my name around. Anyway, long story short, I ended up writing a book on Docker with Manning, and that was very well received. And following that, also, I just sort of started writing a blog. Actually, the blog came first, but the blog sort of took off with the book. And now I just write for fun. I just write whatever I'm interested in. And I've written a couple of books that I self-publish on Bash and Git. Yeah, the writing's really sort of taking off. I enjoy the blog and I do bits and pieces for people who ask. So it's really interesting to see how that's paid dividends 20 years later.
Indeed, exactly. So are you writing another book? Is that on the cards at the moment as well?
At the moment, actually, I'm doing a couple of other things. So I've got a day job, but I have some time to spare. And I'm doing live online training with O'Reilly soon on Bash, following the Bash book I wrote.
Yep.
And I do bits of sort of technical writing for businesses that need it.
Right.
As well as the blog. So yeah, it's I haven't got time really to work on another book. I'm halfway through a Terraform book, which I'm kind of waiting for the next version of Terraform to come out to continue that.
Right. Good. Okay. So we're going to go into the flow of the interview now. So in terms of career tips, is there a sort of a top career tip that you can share with the audience, one they may not know and perhaps should?
You've got to realize that you are a product whether you like it or not. You're selling something within a market, and it's fine to just continue your career and not think about your career in that way. But as soon as you start to really think about what it is you want to do, where would you like to work, what are you selling to the market, then you can really expand your horizons. And for me, what I sort of realized quite late, I worked at a company for 14 years and never really got out there. I never, I didn't blog, I didn't go to meetups. I just sort of stayed in my little comfort zone, my domain. And I realized that a friend of mine actually advised me to read the 10-day MBA. And he said, don't read the whole book, read the first chapter on marketing. And I did. It was a bit of a revelation because it was sort of saying, without marketing, you can't sell anything. So that's where the business book starts. And I really thought about that. And I thought, well, who knows about my skills? And I thought, well, not many people. And so the more people who know about my skills, the more likely I am to get a job I like. So it proved. So I started blogging. I started going out there and giving talks. And I haven't really looked back from that point, really. So it's thinking of myself as something for sale has really helped me focus my energy in the right direction.
So how long ago was that? And when you made that decision to start putting yourself out there and write and obviously present is the other major aspect of it.
Yeah, so I think the first blog post I did was 7 years ago, and no one cared about it. And I spent ages and ages writing that post. It was actually an analysis of Shakespeare's vocabulary. And that was a bit disheartening, but I actually thought, well, you know what? I've actually got something out of that. I've actually produced something that I can look back on and I kind of got it out of my system. I wanted to write that for a long time, and I got it out of my system. And I thought, well, even if no one cares, it's worth going through the process of doing that just to kind of get it out of your system. And then I did it again and again, and the figures for my blog were really, really abysmal. If I was looking to get lots of hits for a number of years until sort of really took off 2 years ago. So I guess I was doing it for 5 years before it took off.
Yeah.
The giving talks came a couple of years after the blog, and it was really when I'd developed a lot of things with Docker and kind of was itching to kind of move on and was ready to share my experience. Like many people, I was extremely tentative about, do I want to actually stand up in front of a room full of people and talk to them? I know nothing, they know everything. I had all those feelings of imposter syndrome that most people have. But I decided again, what's to lose? I'll give it a go. And again, didn't look back. I really enjoyed the process. I find it harrowing, like everyone else. Every time I get up to speak, I think, why did I agree to do this? I want to run away. But usually it works out fine. And even if it doesn't go 100% well, I'll get something out of it and meet people and so on. So again, it's been win-win for me. I've really enjoyed that process, and of course, it helps with finding. In fact, I got my job at Barclays through giving a talk on Docker.
Right.
Literally, I got down from the stage, and someone from Barclays came over and said, "Would you like a drink?" And a year later, I was working for him.
Well, that's a good way of networking, then, isn't it? Standing up in front of people and letting them know who you are.
Well, it's a reverse interview. I think it's a great approach, and I went to meetups with that person afterwards, and he was talent spotting all the time, and it was an eye opener because you realize, oh, actually, there's a lot of people who sit in the audience and just think, this guy clearly cares about this, clearly understands XYZ. I could use them.
So, Ian, in terms of career, we're sort of moving on to ask you about maybe your worst IT career moment and what you learned from that experience.
Well, there are so many. I mean, I could talk about lots of war stories about, bringing down live databases and things like that. But I wanted to talk about something a little bit more broad, which was that, I mentioned I worked for a company for 14 years, and I joined as a grad developer and quickly made a name for myself because I was quite driven. I was relatively old for a graduate, and I really wanted to prove myself. And 2 or 3 years in, I was given a chance to technically lead a team that was going to build products. So we were a time and materials company, and very good at that, I thought. And they wanted to build products to make more money. So I worked in that team. I was sort of the technical leader of that group, and we kind of failed, over the course of a year to make it work. And it was a very chastening experience, knocked my confidence a lot. I didn't really understand at the time what had gone wrong. But looking back, as many people say about these things, is, you learn more from that than you do your successes.
Yes.
It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Your successes confirm what you already knew, which is that you like doing X and you're good at Y. Whereas failing, you missed something, and you have to figure out what that thing is you missed. And in this case, I learned a couple of things. So one is that the follow the money. If you're working in a business and the business makes money from one thing, trying to make it culturally shift to making money some other way is really hard. So it was my first sort of experience of failure to culture change, and that I've seen that pattern many times in many, many ways, and as everyone does across businesses everywhere.
Sure, but do you think that was because did they move completely away from time and materials and sort of go into more product delivery, or did they try and balance the two? Was it because they shifted completely?
Well, I saw this pattern over the 14 years I was there many times. Time materials businesses struggle, as you know, to make money because they don't scale well.
Yes.
And they scale with every new employee you make, you hope you can build them out for money. But to make real money, you need to sell one thing 100 times, and that thing should be exactly the same. It was a really good time materials company, but it couldn't shift to a product mentality because when you want to please the customer, you make compromises on your product. And that pattern did not change. So we built products and then they were just sort of bastardized for each buyer. And so the profits were lost. And I didn't have the experience to really push back on that.
That's interesting. Yeah. The very first company I worked for, their whole business model was on a base or a core product, which then they effectively modified for every client that came along. So you had your standard functionality, and then every client could then decide that they wanted something slightly different. And therefore you supported, I don't know, I think it must have been over 100 different variations of the same core product. And of course, the complexity and the amount of effort required to do that just sort of outweighs the business benefit.
It kills you. It kills
It
you.
does.
But it's very hard to say no to someone with money in their hand.
Yes.
So you see this pattern over and over again. And it's something that, which is why we have this concept of a product manager now, which is so pervasive in the industry and rarely done well, by the way, because your job as product manager is to be an anti-salesman, to say no, to say we haven't got time to do that. We can't make that work for enough people. So we're not going to do it for you yet. And that's a really hard message to send to your customers, and they may go away. And that's a really hard message to send to your superiors.
Indeed, yeah. And the salesman, of course, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, there was that. And then also we did too much. I mean, I see this pattern again over and over, is that we tried to build too much at once. And that lack of focus meant that we struggled to make a success of the things that we did try and do.
Right. Is there anything you took away from that experience that you've taken forward in terms of maybe your thought processes about how you do things?
I mean, I guess if your strategy is not aligned with support from senior management, then your effort may well be wasted. And often when I'm working on something now, if I see that it's not going to work on a strategic level, I won't invest myself too much in it because I know it'll fail. And I will instead work on trying to make that, persuade the people who need to be persuaded that it should work. An example of that is, I worked at Barclays for a long time, and I learned from that experience that enterprises are slow. And I wrote a blog post on this, which took off somewhat. Enterprises are slow for a reason, and you have to understand that reason to actually affect change within it. And I saw a lot of people trying to do the right thing in a way, but not understanding how that fit in with the strategy of the business. And if you're going to make change, you have to work with the grain. or change the people, the decision makers that really count, change their minds. Those things are not easy to do.
So moving away from worst IT career moment, can you perhaps tell us about your career highlight or greatest success?
There was one particular purple patch I had. So I went from application development to third line support. So we ran a trading system, and it needed people who could fix code on live in real time. Bring sites up quickly, make fixes that were robust, that kind of thing. Deal with developers and quickly communicate to them what the problems were. And when I joined, we were about 5 people with £7 million of contract or something to manage, and we grew to 50 people in multiple locations. And I worked with my boss then to manage that team. And one of the many things I learned from that, or did there, was organizing the knowledge base in a way that it became part of the process of the operations team to maintain that documentation. And then we reduced the cost massively of that group and increased the productivity and general happiness of the team significantly by that effort. That involved me spending 7 months full-time writing incident models or runbooks based on previous years' priority incidents. So it was a scary time where I was spending literally all my time writing runbooks, and it took about 4 months, I would say, for it to gain traction. And once it gained traction, we started to see real benefits coming in from that. And in another 3 months, I could go off that project, and it was self-sustaining. Learning about the difficulties of making that process embedded was a huge satisfaction for me, absolutely enormous, to make that work. And also it reduced my stress levels hugely, and the rest of the team, because you knew exactly what the state of the art was with the knowledge. You didn't have to worry about, have I missed something, before I escalate this, am I going to look stupid because I missed something obvious, that kind of thing. It was all documented and it was all maintained.
Right.
Yeah, that was a big highlight for me.
Did you actually have to train people how to use the knowledge base you created, or was it very intuitive? How did you do that?
That was one of the sticky points that we chose to. So we used Jira as our issue tracking tool. And I was pretty insistent that we were going to have the knowledge base in Jira itself. Our documentation manager wanted us to have a separate section on Confluence with documents with an ID on it and so on. And I resisted that because I knew that it had to be co-located with the day-to-day work or it wouldn't work at all. And it was plain text. Another lesson learned from there was that we came up with this brilliant schema for, every possible scenario was covered by this beautiful document that we had, the abstract document that we had that you'd fill out. And actually people hated that because it was too constricting. So we radically, slashed it to very simple description of problem, overview of steps to resolve, further notes, end of structure. And that structure was enough that it was useful to everyone, that everyone could follow it. But it was flexible enough that, if there was a particular way that an issue should be handled, then you could expand it into a different, take it in a different direction.
Right.
And it wasn't too top down then. It was sort of, here's the broad flow, but, if you want to be creative about this, then go ahead. Other people tell you if they don't like it. It was sort of allowed people to really contribute significantly. Also, the fact that we were all on call meant that we were very motivated to make that documentation work.
Yeah. I presume it was open as well, so people could make amendments and changes to it as necessary.
Yeah, and the dev teams loved it because if you escalated an issue to a technical leader on a development team, first thing they'd ask is, have you followed the incident model?
Yep.
And if you said yes, then they'd say, okay, great, then I know where you are. Show me your notes. And if you hadn't, then you'd been poorly trained.
Yes.
So it was a real, it reduced stress levels enormously, and it really highlighted to me how much effort it requires to actually have useful documentation and how beneficial that can be. That said, I tried to inculcate the same thing within Barclays, but I really struggled there because I wasn't really managing the operations team there. I was just trying to help them. So I put together a knowledge base for them and, tried to make it sustainable. But I had no authority and I wasn't co-located with the team that was building it. So it sort of withered on the vine.
Yep.
And that was another lesson, that was, it's like, I actually need power to make this work.
But yeah, power, yes, in terms of authority and influence, but also the buy-in is the other aspect of it as well. Who you're building it for.
Yeah, I mean, everyone bought into it in theory. And I remember when we originally did the documentation within my team, me and my boss were nagging people daily to update because they complained about the documentation being outdated. He said, it's your documentation, you update it. We had to inculcate that feeling of it's yours, you own it, you maintain it. If you don't like it, change it. It's not given to you in, God didn't put them on tablets of stone. They're there for you to improve.
So, Ian, can you perhaps tell us what excites you about the future of the IT industry and careers in IT?
I guess it's more or less the same as what I saw in 2000. When I went into IT, someone said to me a few years before that, there'll be a computer on every desk, I think they said. Computers are everywhere or going to be everywhere. And they weren't at the time. I mean, mobile phones didn't really exist then. And I don't see that stopping. You see the rise of AWS, and you see how every business uses computing power in some way. I don't see that stopping, and it's going to become more part of the fabric of our life, just like gas and electric are, or reading and writing. I look at my kids. My kids are at school. They're about 10 years old, 10, 11, 12, and computers are just part of the fabric of their education. They're everywhere. Obviously, they Google everything and they cut and paste things from Wikipedia and so on. And this is just how the world is to them. And it's just going to get more and more. We're going to have more and more devices about us and more ways to communicate and different kinds of computing. I mean, when I started, it was 3-tier architectures: database, application server, web server. That was pretty much it. You still had your vestiges of embedded computing and so on, which obviously still exist, but are more niche. But now it's such a broad field that opportunities will be everywhere if you seek them. I used to worry about IT becoming not obsolete, but just, we'd run out of things to write. I mean, it sounds crazy now, but I used to worry that we'd run out of things to do. But it obviously doesn't work like that.
It's more of an evolution.
It's used. Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, we're going to go into the reveal round now. We're going to find out a little bit more about you and the way you think. I think we partly covered this, but I'll ask it. What first attracted you to a career in IT?
I'd always liked computers. I always liked logic and maths. But more than that, it was a toss-up between law and computing. And I liked IT because it seemed meritocratic. And there was always scope to learn more in IT. You weren't constrained by being a specialist in a particular area. So that's what got me into it. And
what is the best career advice you've ever received?
I think it was get organized. I got properly organized around the age of 30 when I made a mistake at work, and it was basically down to my failure to track something. Very busy at, running a support operation. Coincidentally, I'd read the book Getting Things Done, and I applied all the principles of it. And that's allowed me to freed my head up enough to allow me to do all the other things I've done to further my career.
And conversely, what's the worst career advice you've ever received?
A CEO once told me, you've got to go for the promotion to pay for the mortgage you don't have yet. I think that was pretty bad advice. I think his strategy was get me to get a mortgage, then I would need the job and I wouldn't leave. It was an example of poor incentive management.
If you were to begin your IT career again right now, what would you do?
I think I would change jobs more. It's another piece of career advice that I got. My mother told me that Madonna said, so I don't know how accurate it is, but apparently she said, once you've learned all you can somewhere, move on.
Right.
I think that's good advice. Don't stick somewhere just because it's comfortable.
And what career objectives are you currently focusing on?
I think expanding the writing side. I'm very interested in what drives change within an organization. I think a lot of people are interested in that, but it's something that I really think about a lot. But broadly, I'm just still trying to get out there and meet people.
And what do you do in your own career to keep it energized?
Well, as I mentioned, I do bits of writing. I do bits of consulting. I think the blog has really helped me focus. It gives me a structure in which I can learn things to an end and then drop them. So, I might give myself a task at home, and rather than letting that drift, I'll actually focus it on. If I can write a blog piece on it that's coherent, then I've actually learned it. I think that's how I keep motivated.
And what do you do away from technology?
Not enough. I play guitar, and I've just taken up drawing. I try and do things which are non-verbal if I can. I think that it helps to exercise that, not so logical part of the brain.
Yes. Bit more creative.
Yeah. Well, I find IT work very creative, actually, but getting away from straight line thinking is really important, because it is a lot of straight line thinking.
So, Ian, can you perhaps share a parting piece of career advice with the IT Career Energizer audience?
Yeah, it's something I heard from someone years ago, and it sort of stuck with me. And it's a very simple piece of advice, which is always good. And it said, when you have a choice between two things to do the thing that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. So don't do the things that make you really uncomfortable. But if you feel this twinge of, can I really do this? I'm not really sure. Then go for that thing. And you find that you expand your horizons pretty quickly when you do that.
I mean, yes, you've given a couple of examples of how you've done that yourself. Obviously, that's something you've now built into the way you work and the way you look at things when they come before you.
Yeah, and I think the word slightly is really important. You can push yourself in an area where you're really uncomfortable, and then it's probably not for me, like sales. I've been pushed into sales many times, and it doesn't sit right with me. But something slightly uncomfortable usually means, you should probably give that a go. And it might not work out, and it hasn't in many cases for me, but usually I learn something from it, and that pays dividends later.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And finally, Ian, what's the best way we can find out more about you and connect with you?
Best way to connect with me is Twitter. I'm at Ian Miell, IANMIELL. And find out more about me. I guess my blog is pretty open book. It's very hard to spell. So it's called zwischenzugs.com, which is a German word meaning in between move. But yeah, that's the best place to find out more about me. Or LinkedIn, I suppose, is the classic place.
Yeah, well, don't worry. The link will be on the show notes page on the website, so people will be able to find it there anyway.
Good.
Cool. Ian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
A quick thank you again to my guest on today's show for sharing their career tips, advice and experiences. You'll find a show notes page for today's episode on the IT Career Energizer website, which will be itcareerenergizer.com/e and then the number of today's episode. Now that there are 3 new episodes of the show every week, make sure that you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss out. And don't forget to join the new IT Career Energizer community group in Facebook. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would be great to hear from you and to learn about your own career journey, your successes, opinions, and thoughts on the future of the industry. Thanks for supporting the show, and remember, if you're not growing your career, you're slowing your career.
Thanks for listening to the IT Career Energizer podcast. To find out more about building a successful career in IT, visit itcareerenergizer.com.